Um, there we go. Got it. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening on this beautiful, warm, sunny Sunday. We're so excited to discuss Boys Run the Riot by Keito Gaku today. Before we get started, we're gonna do some introductions and an icebreaker. And for each introduction, you're gonna say your name, pronouns, and the icebreaker for today is, I will send it in the chat. It's, what is a fashion piece you have that you've never had the chance to wear, but you desperately want to? So, think about that, sit with that. I'll send it in the chat. And once you're done with your intro, you can point it to somebody else in the Zoom room. So I can go first. My name is Morgan. I'm one of the Hardcover Hotties admin. I use she/her pronouns, and one fashion piece that I have that I never get to wear but desperately want to. This is a really difficult one, but I feel that I have a lot of like really formal dresses that like would be fit for a ball, for a gala of sorts, but I'm rarely ever invited to those. Why? I don't know, but I'm really waiting for that one like formal event, for the midnight ball where I'm going to meet Prince Charming, and like it'll come, but for now it's gonna sit in my closet and I'm never gonna get rid of it. So I'm going to pass it over to Charles.
Hi everyone, I'm Charles, he, him pronouns. I have like this crazy freaking pink dress that I got from Goodwill a long time ago on like a Halloween sale. So it's basically a Halloween costume, but I don't get to wear it a lot because it's a really it's a crazy dress. Let's see. Let me throw this to Ellen.
I'm Ellen. I'm also a Hardcover Hotties admin. I use they, she pronouns. Um, Okay, I have a really tall pair of shoes that I like have worn once, but I really like being taller. And if I could wear them every day, I would. Um, but I just cannot. So I want to find more opportunities to wear really, really, really tall shoes. And I'm gonna pass it to Aria.
Thank you. I like have nothing, but I like buy all my clothes and I immediately wear them. But there's this dress I have that I've been wearing, but it's like super hot and it's like kind of formal. But I'm like, well, I can go to class. This is fine. But I want to like, I'm having the same problem. Like nobody invites me to like formal balls. Like I don't know why, but yeah, that's my pick. Oh, I'm Aria, she, her pronoun. I forgot to mention that. But yeah.
And then do you want to popcorn it over to someone?
You are so right. One sec. I'll popcorn it to D.
Hi guys, sorry, my screen doesn't seem to be working. I tried to re-download the app, but it is flopping. I'm D, they, she pronouns. What is the introduction prompt question mark?
What is one fashion piece that you have in your closet that you never get to wear but you desperately want to?
Ooh. That is a hard question because I feel like I wear most of my clothes because I just don't give a fuck. I guess. Ooh, I have leather loafers that I've thrifted and I don't wear them a lot because I'm not doing business snazzual things very often. And I also don't want to get them dirty by doing other things. So yeah, I don't wear those very often, but I really want to because they're cunty. And has everybody gone or should I popcorn it to somebody? Okay, popcorning to Lauren.
Hi everyone. I'm Lauren. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also a Hardcover Hotties admin. This is the most difficult question in the world because I don't wear like 60% of my closet because it's all items that I desperately want to wear, but like never have on the right occasion. I have this like fur, like it's like a wrap basically from my grandma, and it's just like extremely glamorous for no reason. So that's something that I would wear to a ball or a formal event. Um, and then I also have like a leather, it's like a brown alligator leather. I think it's like leather and it's double-sided, but it's like a corset. And I like am not like I don't know how to style it. So maybe if anyone has advice. So that's my answer. And I will popcorn it to Jay.
Hi, Jay Colagayan, he, him. Let's see, fashion piece. I got a dark ruby red pair of Doc Martens and high cut boot. And it's painful. I cannot break them in. It is horrible pain. I feel like a baby walking for the first time. I can't break them in, and I feel like I think I have to ice my feet after I try to. I really, it's almost like a horse that I need to like break in. But I can't. Oh, and we are doing a prompt question. What's a fashion piece that you never get to wear but desperately want to?
Who are you popcorning? It cut out a little bit.
Oh, sorry, to Jessica. And I said the question. Do you want me to repeat the question, Jessica?
I understood it. But my name's Jessica. I'm Stephanie's cousin, so I'm here. Something I want to wear. I have boots, some Steve Madden boots. I don't wear them as much because, as well, it's hard to break them in, but I will wear them time to time. But yeah. Am I supposed to popcorn someone else? Who hasn't gone? I have Stephanie. I'll popcorn Stephanie.
Hey everybody. My name is Stephanie. I use she, they pronouns, and I am also a Hardcover Hotties admin. So what piece would I like to wear? This is, as Lauren said, I have a lot of pieces that I really want to bring out, and I feel like I just don't get the chance to. But I'm going to talk about the piece that I talk about to everyone. I have these shoes that are just amazing. And they're white and have like really cool like metal pieces around them. And I feel like they look really great with a bunch of different outfits. But they are just so painful to walk in. I'll have them on for like a little bit and I'll feel really confident, and then 30 minutes in, they're off. I'm in socks or I'm barefoot, and I'm much shorter again. So it just never really works out. But they're still sitting in my closet for the day when I I can power through it, which I hope is soon. Okay, so it's looking like everyone had an opportunity to introduce themselves. And if anyone else comes in, we'll just have them, we'll just welcome them too. So I'm going to talk a bit about why we are here today. So, as you all know, the book of the month this month was Boys Run the Riot by Keito Gaku. And this book is by a manga creator that is actually going to be coming to Columbus at the end of September for Cartoon Cartoon Columbus Crossroads, Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. And we have the executive director, Jay, here to talk a little bit about the event, and then I'll talk a bit more about the book too.
Hello again. I'm the person that can't wear their Doc Martens. Okay, so Keito Gaku is going to be a guest this year at Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. And thanks to CCAD, the college, Columbus College of Art and Design, Kodansha, Pop Culture Studies at Ohio State University, and the Japan Foundation in New York, we are bringing this mangaka artist here. Keito Gaku was one of the first manga artists to come out as trans, as well as feature trans characters. So it is a big deal that we are bringing him here, and that event's going to be on September 30th. 8 o'clock at the Kanzani Center Auditorium at CCAD. Tickets are free, so if you want to spread the word, but we are trying to have tickets. So free tickets, but it's good if you reserve your tickets. So it'll be about an hour talk, and then if you want to get your books, if you want to get your books autographed, that'll be Sunday at the main library, the next day at our expo. So there's a lot of great programming. If you go to Cartoon Crossroads Columbus.org, you'll see probably about 55 hours of free programming. We do a lot of fundraising. We got a lot of great partners like GCAC, White Castle, UBS, and they give money so we can keep CXC free. So if you have an opportunity, there's a lot of great programs, and usually a lot of them you can just pop in, but just usually the evening ones are the ones that we just have ticketed. So, and again, free tickets. So hope to see you there.
Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. We're very excited to be there and to do a little field trip with all of you guys over there too. Yes, Charles will be there, so we're hoping to bring more. And yeah, just a bit of background on the story that we read this month. So here we meet Rio and Jean, and Rio is a closeted trans teenage boy who is just struggling a lot with his gender identity, just trying to name it, define what it means, and build relationships when this is a part that he can't share freely with his friends or family. And we see how fashion, art, and other forms of creative expression are very healing, and how the power of friendship has a lot of backing to pull that out of someone. So this was a very beautiful read. I loved it. I found it like extremely inspiring, and I hope you guys did too. I binged the first one, and then I had to binge the whole series. I couldn't take a break. And then just shove it in the face of all of my family members. So we have a couple discussion questions ready for you guys to reference, which someone's going to try to Morgan is gonna drop the questions into the chat right now. But I'm going to get us started with the first one, which just like lead us into discussion, but also feel free to just say your general opinions about the book. But what did you find interesting about Rio's relationship to creativity and art as it ties to his identity as a closeted trans boy? Also, anyone can feel free to unmute and talk.
I think that the book did a really good job of setting up like creative expression and art as like a space for self-expression, and instead of emphasizing like the product, I feel like the process was emphasized more. And we got to see like how taking on like any kind of artistic practice like can really facilitate like conversations that you might like not have found yourself in, and like kind of like internal processing that doesn't seem related, but it ends up being related, like as Rio and Jean build the brand together. And I really liked seeing that aspect of it too. Like we do see the finished piece at the end, which was awesome. I want a shirt, but yeah, I like that we got to see them kind of like come together and figure out what that brand means for them and what creative expression means to both of them and how to bring that to other people too. So I thought that was really cool.
So I thought that Rio used art as an expression of his rage at first, his frustrations, the graffiti and everything like that. And through doing the brand and meeting other people who understand him, um, got to channel that rage art into something else, which I think is very constructive, and not a lot of people have that opportunity. I do think like graffiti by itself and street art could be a whole different series, and I think that that is a place where people who feel like outsiders or misunderstood or having emotions that they can't express, they use street art and art as a way to convey that.
I like that point you made, Jay, about like graffiti being like outsiders reclaiming, but I think it's also at the same time like a reclamation of space because I think graffiti started in like the Bronx, right, which is a very and still is a very poor part of New York, mostly Black and immigrants. So I think of them taking control of their space, which has been like redlined and so like disadvantaged by the government, is like we're gonna put art on like everything. And that also in Cuba they have that a lot too because you have like I mean it's not perfect. I'm not a state is socialist, but they have like a socialist government. It's not everything's commodified. You have a lot more art on everything. So I think it's like Rio is like kind of reclaiming like a world that he doesn't feel exactly home in a way, especially in like his school. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
I think also that like obviously like fashion, as we all know, is like a form of art. And so it's like it is for him the only way that he gets to feel like himself because he's in an environment that's very homogenous and like homogeny is very like enforced because with the uniforms, like Rio has to dress as something he very much is not with the uniforms and the skirts and all that. So like having that fashion is truly like the one of the very few avenues where he's able to like use like material things to like look like his identity. Like people were confused out and about in Japan when they would see him because they couldn't tell, or like his classmates were just like he's dressing like a boy, and it's like yeah, because like this is the one time where he can like it's just so important to him to be able to do that and like also develop his own specific style with respect to that. So I don't know, I guess fashion and identity are like one in the same, or they start out as one in the same for Rio.
Yeah, that's very true. Um, Again, going a bit back to the graffiti, that was something that really caught my attention because um I feel like I've seen a lot of spaces in Chicago that have like tags versus like murals and like legalized street art. So I was thinking about like the surveillance and like legality that comes around it, like with it. Because obviously the art that Rio's doing on school property is like deeply, everyone is like so taken aback by it, and they're like, oh, who did this? Who is like making this face, or like I don't know, finding a way to like stand out. And I saw it as like such a big contradiction in like his own day to day, where he doesn't want to stand out at all. And like the phrase that's like used a lot throughout the book of I think it's like the nail that sticks out, like the gets like hammered down. Yet graffiti on a place where it's like definitely not supposed to be is having like the whole school like talking about it, but there isn't that spotlight that's directly on him, and it finally gets to be like moved for once, like with his own like autonomy behind it. And so I found that like very powerful. And I feel like I haven't really seen, I've read like my fair share of manga in the past, and I haven't seen a lot of forms of interaction with art, like specifically with like graffiti. So I thought that was really cool. And I like how it was like incorporated into the pieces as well.
I think also in the back of the book, like it wasn't the like person who made the story and drew the manga who did the graffiti art, but he actually like involved a different artist who I think was a graffiti artist for the art that Rio would do. So I think that was like it's interesting that there's not more crossover.
So that leads me to ask, how did Boys Run the Riot compare to other forms of media that you guys have encountered, especially for like younger audiences? Or have you even like seen anything like this before?
Okay, I will chip in yet again. So Charles and I saw Bottoms yesterday, and in terms, that's not actually what I'm going to talk about, but the trailers beforehand, there was like Dante and Artemis. I didn't watch that one, but we were just like on the subject of a lot of like queer YA stories, and like how a lot of them are very cheesy. This was, I think, able to like be a queer story that was happy and like not fall on the like too cheesy line. And it didn't involve like it wasn't about all the horrible things. Like it found the balance between, okay, this person has this internal struggle, self versus environment, but like that's not entirely what the book was about, and it wasn't some tragedy, and it also wasn't some like cheesy, like overly sweet, like very digestible for like hetero people story either. Like I think it is digestible, but it's not, I just didn't find it corny at all. And I think that's like very hard line to toe, especially in young adult content.
Oh, Dee, that reminds me, I feel like what I really liked about it, and what for me also made it not corny, was how self-aware it was through like the characters. I loved how we had characters giving like every type of reaction that a reader could be having at every event. So as soon as like Jean walks in and is like doing all these like confident things, Rio is like in the background like, oh, this guy's so cringy, he's weird, or why did he do that? And then later on when he like speaks in front of the whole, like takes the mic and starts like talking, you see other expressions being like super shocked or like taken aback. And although we do get some other reactions, some of the haters reactions too, I feel like it kind of shows like the range that really like exists on like these topics. It wasn't just trying to like present you with like lead you into what you should think, or tell you that there was like a right or wrong, which I really respected, because there was always like a character that I could feel like seen with, which I enjoyed.
Stephanie, am I right about this? I think so. They did like the thought bubble reactions with Rio. They also did it with the photographer character. But I think, is Jin one of the few characters where they didn't where Jin was always just saying what he was thinking no matter what? I don't think he ever had like thought bubbles at all. Or I think he just was just like, what do you mean? You know, like he would actually ask those questions. He was very surface in a good way, in a good way.
Yeah, I picked up on that too, and also having read through the other volumes as well, I noticed that he was just always an upbeat guy who was saying what was on his mind, and you got to see every character's reaction to that as well, their shock with it. I thought he was pretty out there with a bunch of the stuff he was doing. Um, uh, so for some of them, I was definitely on Rio's side. I was like, I could never do what he just did. Yeah, I think that I agree. Sometimes he was really doing a lot sometimes. But it did prove to be like very, very good to push the story along. Like he kind of like put everybody else in situations that they maybe hadn't like thought they would be in. And I think especially in like high school too, with them like going in and already having like pre-established kind of like relationships with all of their classmates and stuff. And then like he kind of just comes in and like shakes everything up and kind of gets things going. So I thought that was cool. It was fun. I never knew what he was gonna do next. Like when he got up in front of the assembly, I was like, what's he doing this time? But yeah, I don't know if I would have done that one.
I think another thing I would add about him is that like compared to like other like queer media, you don't really see a lot of examples of like good platonic relationships between like someone who's queer and someone who's an ally. I feel like a lot of like coming of age queer media always kind of forces some romantic relationship. And I really liked that this manga had like a really um, a really strong focus on like friendship and those kind of relationships.
I agree completely, Charles. Like it's I really love that like romance isn't necessarily the like vessel or like the tool used in the story to like facilitate the self-discovery and like acceptance and stuff like that. Like it was really refreshing that it's like this platonic relationship meant just as much and it was just as central to Rio's personal development and like becoming the man he wants to be as like it would be if he was like dating a girl or something. Like in fact it's like almost less distracting in some ways. um yeah, I really really liked that. And also I just feel like back to Jen, he was so relatable, not that we all could like see ourselves in him, but it's like we all know that effing guy who's just like a clown and he just like doesn't give a f and he's kind of off in his own world. He does his own thing and he's like the book wasn't corny, but Jen was definitely super corny and it's like yeah, we needed him. He was the appropriate amount of cheese.
Yeah, I totally like I agree. He um like even with his quips and his like personality too, it kind of brought like a lightness to everything too. Which I thought was yes, he killed the part that cringes. That's so true. Um, but yeah, he kind of did allude to I think it's the first time that Rio says to him, like the nail that sticks out is the one that gets hammered down, which is such like a I like don't think I've heard that phrase before, but in retrospect, like it like makes so much sense. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I can apply it to so many scenarios, um, and things like that. But he was kind of like egging I feel like Jin, by being so crazy, was egging Rio to like be that nail that sticks out, and like it's okay if he like showing him that it's like okay if certain people like react negatively or whatever, like how important it is to be true to yourself by killing the part that cringes, as Morgan said, which was awesome. Because especially when you're like a teenager too, that's like the most like cringeworthy like phase of your life, basically. Or I, at least I thought so for myself, but yeah. There's a question that we have that also relates to this. Because there are like some major differences between like how out there these characters are willing to like put themselves. How did you interpret some of the differences in the unique relationship that Rio and Jean held towards Shane? Because as like Dee was saying earlier, there is always that one person that just feels like super free. But it was interesting. I thought the way Jean was like, oh, you should just like be very open and you should just like, how can I support you when you don't talk about it? Except he's saying it from a position as a cis hetero man who doesn't can like very much be the ally that helps Rio express himself and like have that coming of age plot, but still cannot fully understand like the internal like conflict that has happened before, and also like in other spaces like there's just like that disconnect there. I don't know, did anyone else catch that too?
I didn't catch it, but now that you brought it up, it does bring up some thoughts, like specifically how like it is much easier for Jin to like be spastic and self-expressive and whatever, because it's like he is in probably the most comfortably situated like intersection of identities that he could possibly be in. So it's like, of course, and then he like doesn't, I think the pushing he does is really necessary for Rio to open up to another person, but also he doesn't necessarily know Rio's past in the way that like maybe there was a good friend in Rio's life who like was similar to Jin in terms of identity, but like, you know, betrayed Rio at some point. It's like there are probably a number of reasons why Rio would maybe normally hesitate to like be open about who he is and the way he feels and all of his struggles, but I don't know. That's all.
It's like kind of related, but I saw like that as part of like a larger thing about how like being in the closet like sucks for you, and also like your life is kind of like a lot worse. Like it's hard to form meaningful relationships, especially. And like I think of that one scene where Rio's gets like hit on by that dude, and he's like, do I like I maybe I just wasn't reading this like clearly, but it was like, is he like into men, or is he into men but as a man, or is he just like not into men? I was like not sure, and it's like as long as you're like in the closet, it's like looking through like a funhouse mirror, but like a really like a horrible one. Um, so yeah, but also there's like I feel like the characters. Maybe this isn't exactly. I binged it today, so like maybe I'm misremembering this, but I feel like it was like some people were like, "How dare you like be in the closet," which I thought really was like dismissive and didn't really was like not empathetic to like the reality of what that feels like. But yeah.
I thought this manga did like a really good job of showing like how shame can be weaponized uh, against people to like try and force them to like conform. Like I really love that Hammer quote. And I also loved how like it also shows like the joy that comes with like shedding that shame and just like living your truth. And I that also like ties in kind of like to the overall theme of like rebelliousness, and I feel like it's super rebellious just to like not give in to shame and just like live authentically.
I think thinking about Dee's mention of, was it like the Aristotle and Dante discover secrets of the universe? Okay, love that young adult book. Right now I'm reading The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School by Sonora Reyes, and it's a great book. Another young adult literature book that talks about being a closeted lesbian at a Catholic school. And as a young like Mexican woman, I thought that that was like, I don't know, it just kept bringing up themes from like Boys Run the Riot for me as I'm reading this book, because it is a very unique environment to be in a high school where people know you in a certain way, and there's like an uplifting of certain values and traditions that one is like expected to follow. So that's a double way to stand out. And specifically in this book that I'm reading, there's a lot of mention on how the school uniforms make her feel. So going to a private Catholic school, she has to wear like skirts and like a shirt, but mostly it's like the skirt that tends to be like an issue and gets brought up at times. And I could not imagine how it's like mentioned so much during Boys on the Riot, but it really just like shows how much that truly can like affect characters, because even though like uniforms are supposed to be this one like neutralizing force where in one aspect it can be seen as like a common ground where people can't like show off their wealth in certain ways, or like can remove a bit of that like tension of how you're meant to express yourself, but it's also so limiting in terms of gender expression, which is an umbrella that of course a lot of administrators and that are like keeping up those long held values are not being made aware of. And I feel like that's the current shift that we're seeing with a lot of youth, and especially trans youth, with that being more in conversation, and a lot of the legislation and new stories that we're just hearing about like what's going on and in different like school districts across the US. So I was able to like just make that connection and think a lot about that, because I know I definitely went to schools that upheld like very strict like uniform policies that people were not happy with.
Yeah, it also makes me think of like the, I don't want to use the word hegemony, but like in a lot of ways it is kind of like that. Like there's this one all ruling power, and like what you said about the neutralizing people's appearance, where there was even like policing with like how like length of the skirt. So it's not like just your gender expression, but also what type of woman they want you to be, and also what type of build they want you to have. Because some people, it was gonna like just sit a little higher on their thighs because they didn't like make jumpers, or at least specifically jumpers were what was used at my Catholic schools, but like they didn't make them for like larger sized people, and so like they would get in trouble when their skirt would ride up because they don't have a size that is made that is like adequate for their body, and that would and they would have to like spend extra money to go get it tailored and like go get the like hem extended and all these different things. And also just the way that it's somehow there is still like even in environments where everybody is quote looking the same by dressing the same, there's still like sexualization that goes on. Yeah.
That was a banger. That was a banger, dude. I was thinking before you said that, like about school having like a kind of colonial purpose, especially in like the Americas where you have like indigenous Americans being sent to these and being basically like Americanized, like robbed of their culture. And I think school, especially when you have the gender, it's kind of like a sorting into like only like the gender binary, which is like another colonial construct. I think it's super true what you're saying about like it's like colonizing the body as well. Like it's trying to like sort people to an ideal. It's like even if like they're making the skirts and the uniforms for like an imagined ideal, like what students, women should be. And that's like based on colonial norms. And yeah.
So I think something that comes up with uniforms a lot is like authority and kind of like the sense of authority that's telling like there's obviously has to be someone over you like telling you what that ideal would be for a uniform. Um, so I wanted to kind of expand this more broadly to Boys Run the Riot and talk about Rio's relationship to like his teachers because we see them like react very differently. And they are like all authority figures, especially after the spray painting incident. I wanted to see what you guys thought on like his relationship to his teachers, what you thought about Gaku's like portrayal of those teachers as well, and get into that more if anybody has thoughts. Okay, I'll carry my comment section scream into voice form, but teachers, they hold so much power, whether they know it or not, in the lives of their students. I can say that as a past student who has gone through many teachers and has a lot of those experiences have like truly stuck with me. I don't know if you guys were able to see this on our story, but I shared the author from Genderqueer wrote like a little comic for the nib that was about like just book banning and what that really did for book sales and all the comments that all like the feedback that was being like received post the book ban. And something that was like really highlighted in there was how teachers and librarians were the ones being like, oh, I know either someone I could recommend genderqueer to, or I know that this would be like a great fit for my classroom or for like a friend. And it wasn't just exclusively for like young adults. It was like being sent out to multiple people, and they were the main people fighting for these book bans to be taken away or for people to still have access to these like important pieces of literature. And I feel like we've seen that time and again, especially with the book ban. The people who are standing up there on the microphones defending these books and wanting them in their school districts are the teachers who are doing it on their own time. And we get to see that in Boys Run the Riot, just like how one teacher can really at least make someone like second guess why their heuristic is so like negatively minded towards their students, because depending on the school district or the tradition like around it, it can be easy to have that like tunnel vision towards certain ideas. But I'm specifically thinking about, was it like I don't know if it's the gym teacher, but it was this one woman who kept like interrupting other teachers. And I'm on the page right now,
this is the character I'm referring to, where she says, as teachers, how can you say such things about your students? Isn't it your responsibility if they don't feel it? Okay, this part. Isn't it your responsibility if they don't feel like they can come and talk to you? That was just chills for me, because it's true. A lot of the times it is the environment that, and in a very simple terms, the vibe the teacher brings, that can really shift whether or not students feel comfortable coming to school and really like being themselves or having someone to talk to. And it can like make or break whether like trans youth specifically are going to class and getting an education or skipping class because they feel like their whole identity is being judged like constantly while they're in there. Like creating that, taking like the quote like safe space and putting it into action is, so that was long-winded, but teachers just have so much power, and that's why I appreciate them so much.
Um, yeah, that was awesome. First of all, second of all, I just wanted to add that I think that like the most meaningful interaction that we saw between Rio and like an older or like adult figure was with his teacher and not with his like parents really or anything. Um, and I thought that was interesting, especially because school is like one of the first places that you kind of like you have to, you're forming your identity not with your family. So it's like other people that you're around all the time. These teachers like see you every day. Like you're, and it's that time of life where you are kind of like developing your own sense of self. So that is so true that you need that like really safe space. And I was so grateful that Rio had that like relationship to that teacher, or that teacher felt um like took the initiative and sought Rio out basically. I was like really grateful for that happening, because mentors can really like do so much and be so meaningful, which is awesome. So I was glad to see that positive like representation too, especially for the audience. Like I'm glad that whoever's like reading this book got to see that moment too, and hopefully it can maybe like if like a younger person reading it, hopefully it can positively impact their relationships with their teachers or their thoughts about them.
Well, I have a question for you guys. So, one of the things that I noticed very first off in like the couple pages, especially with like the binding scene in the bathroom, was the little like editor's notes that were like between the panels. How did it feel as a reader to have editor's notes, or to like just know that you're in conversation with the like US editing team, that was like made clear through like little editor's notes and then like the questions in the back and translators notes? Did you like find yourself like shifting to like the translation notes and seeing like maybe why they made a certain word choice, or like stop at like certain phrasing and be like, oh, I've never heard like somebody say this before? Like the one I've noticed like we keep bringing up is the nail that like sticks out, gets like hammered down, and just different like colloquial expressions. Have you guys either like had experience with like other forms of media that have that like those types of insertions before, or yeah, how did it like shift your reading experience?
I feel like I come across this a lot, like in English translations of manga. Like I think it's a really like common thing for, especially with like the like cultural and like translation notes, because oftentimes it really is like important to like the bubbles and like the stories and stuff, and even like the little like I see a lot like the little like sound onomatopoeias. So, the little sound like notes, and they're usually in like Japanese characters, and then like I love to see like the English translation of those. But with this one particularly, like there are like multiple layers of like the cultural like translations, with like one like Japanese to English, and then also like the notes about things that are like well known to people within the queer community, that they are like um making clear to people who might not understand it like at first glance, which I thought was really cool, and I hadn't seen that before. And or like yeah, I don't think I've ever come across a piece of media that has like um been so forward about clarity with like those types of like, whether it be actions or like terminology. So I thought it was cool like how there were a lot of different sides to like what the editor was like making sure that the reader understood as they were like moving through the story.
Specifically about like the little insert on like in the very beginning of the manga where um he was like binding. I love that they included that resource about like further on like how to do this safely, because I feel like there's just so many things that like queer people have to either teach themselves or they learn from others. Like there's just not a lot of like mainstream guidance or resources, so I thought this was really cool. That's like a cool resource.
Yeah, especially for like a younger audience too. I think that's really, really awesome. And when I was researching the author spotlight, I did a lot of research about like manga translation, and localization and things like that. Because a lot of the things that were being brought up, and we can see it in the end of it's in the interview at the end of the book, but they had an entirely trans non-binary translation and localization team, which is really awesome because I think that it just like ensured I couldn't find like too many like interviews with the actual editor. But um I think that it's really it shows like how much care was put into like making sure this like was like everything was well represented, well like talked about context, everything like the meaning was like the same and the meaning was there because like when I was reading about manga translation, um I found that when you're translating between like the translators are basically rewriting the story because like Japanese is such a high context language and English is not. So when you're going between the two, it can be really hard to like ensure that the meaning is the same. And Morgan touched on this earlier, but like ensure the meaning is the same. Like jokes are another big like area where translation is really important and like with tone of voice, which I think was really important in this story too. Um, it really like it takes a lot of work to ensure that the author's like original meaning is like is the same when you're translating it to an English audience. So I I think that they did awesome. I think that they did good. And it's good to see like hopefully they're setting a good precedent for that in the future too.
Another like part of the translation notes that I thought was really really interesting and cool. Like yeah, just like these like pages I just thought were so awesome because it was so well described, like all parts of it. But the way that they talked about pronouns specifically in the Japanese language is something I think really different for like English speakers, and like that was like a part of like context to Theo's experience with like gender identity like exploration, and like how he used like first person pronouns and like just describing himself. So they like talked about like his like like uh in like the Japanese version of like this story, like there were things that were um like better understood like in the Japanese language that like couldn't necessarily be translated to here, and like they talked about the use of like um him using the first person pronoun ore to, which is like used by men, versus and then like switching to uchi, which is like primarily used by girls, and then just like the use of like chan and kun and san, like those I just thought those were all really nice, and because they like took an approach that like was directly related to like um my headphones just died, so give me 1 second.
I think that something that Morgan brought up earlier too, which was like more about like previous experience with like translations. I feel like I've had like my own fair share of like um reading like novels or like poetry books, like specifically that like have that like melodic feel that can definitely interfere with how that text is read. I thought it was really interesting how they moved away from the technical side of it and were able to have like that initiative to show more personality through their editor's notes. So as Charles mentioned, the note that was like on binding, that note and adding a resource is a level of care and personality that you just I haven't like really had a chance to like interact with something like that before, but I really liked it. And like what like Morgan was mentioning at the end, they do a good job of describing like the unique choices that they made, because at the end of the day, um editors and translators are making choices often on behalf of someone. So in this instance, obviously it's Keito Gaku's like work, but on behalf of someone who is sharing their own unique story. So I know it's like mentioned that it has some it's like semi autobiographical, so some things like do relate to personal experiences that Keito Gaku like had in throughout his life, but they do such like careful planning and create an open dialogue with the reader. And considering that it is meant to be for young adults and like young trans readers and queer youth, having that like those notes of care is already just doing like really big leaps and bounds towards um showing how meaningful like this manga can be, and just like representation can truly be, like moving away from like representation of politics to like representation that like actually like cares for you and is like holding you through the unique circumstances that are like in play. Even if you read like I'm in the interview with Keito at the back of the book, and I wanted to talk about the part where it's like it's
semi kind of autobiographical, where like certain events in the manga are inspired by things that happen in Keito's life. But there's a part where he says, throughout the series, Rio and his friends grapple with monetizing their lived experiences as LGBTQ plus people, which is something that I also went through while making this series. It kind of felt like I was working these things out alongside Rio and his friends as I drew their story. So I think that that really it's like crazy to see like Keito's his creative expression through writing and making this story is mirroring what's happening like with Rio, and Rio's expression through like creativity and creating a brand and drawing and the graffiti and stuff like that. So that's like it's just it's yeah, like Dee said, super meta, but in like a really awesome way. So yeah, and a lot of the like interviews that I read um with Keito too, we're talking about how like it's Rio isn't supposed to like be him or anything like that, but he says that the way that Rio reacts in certain situations, that's how like he felt he would react or like he would handle certain situations. So yeah, I think a lot it's like it's awesome to see that through this book too. And I think that's why it probably has been so like relatable to so many people too, because it handles like this experience with so much like care, and it affords Rio so much like humanity. And yeah, when I was like I was looking into like the kind of like the history of like trans representation in manga and anime. That hasn't always been the case. So it's great to see that here and now.
Honestly, I need more queer people to be monetizing their identities in some way, because I'm just coming off of bottoms and just seeing how I think the internet has given a lot of access to cultures where like certain groups wouldn't normally interact, and which has led to a certain level of like proximity and comfortability of like people who are not necessarily a part of an identity to tell stories of people who actually have this identity and lived experience, and they're making money off of it, and the actual queer people are just being exploited, and like they're getting all their they're just being used as like a resource that is like chugged away at, and they're being left with like having to still be like fucking baristas and stuff instead of like movie makers. It's like, I don't know. I have many thoughts. I think that is such, because I think queerness too is like very tied to like when once you I think fully recognize your queerness, or at least for the queer people I hang out with, like that is tied to your like class position and like so many other things in society. Like you just you think differently about capitalism, you think differently about like all these different things. So I think it's supernatural for Rio and the author to have like gone through that inner turmoil. But the thing is like the people who are not of these identities are not going through that same turmoil. They're just like going straight to the like, oh, this is a story that a lot of people are gonna like. It's okay, and I'm gonna make money off of it. Cha-ching. Like, and there's not the same struggle, and it's irritating. So I would rather people who are of the Ligma experience, Ligma being LGBT, to start getting in their bag.
No, I kind of disagree a little bit. I feel like queer people are always going to be at a disadvantage because under capitalism, we're an oppressed group, which means we're going to be oppressed financially as well. So it's automatically easier for privileged groups. Like it's easier for the average white cishet dude to make like a movie about trans people than the average trans person, obviously. So it's always going to be more of that, and like just monetizing us. I don't think. Well, I've been thinking about how can I like share my story without like just commodifying my life, or like help out other trans people by like sharing stories. And I feel like we can establish non-capitalistic spaces for that. Like I think support groups are kind of that, but I feel like there could be like an even broader version of that because I think it is like storytelling is such a uniquely, I don't know if it's unique, but it's very human. It's like very old and we don't do it that often anymore, I feel. And if it is, it's very commodified. So I think it's important that we find some way to do that without being like, oh, give me money. And at the same time, like I was actually talking to this other person about this, but like there's always when you're like any oppressed identity, you can always like commodify yourself a little bit for some extra money. And I think like the example that comes to mind is like Black culture in America, like how that's been just it's kind of similar to the queer experience where it's like average Black person is like less advantaged under capitalism. So you get like all the white film companies make like all these like movies about I don't know if they made a James Brown one yet, but they will in like 2 years. So that and like 12 Years a Slave. And it's like the actual economic condition of Black people is just like the same. So I think we need to overthrow capitalism. And there's one more thing. There's a quote I really like, which basically says like when people tell stories about oppressed groups and they aren't part of it, it's talking about specifically Black Americans. But it's like a way you can like point to people's successes as when you're part of the privilege, you can point to like some successes and like show how much better you are than like the bad white people. But yeah, I'm gonna try to find that quote. That's my thought.
That's definitely a very good point. And for me, it made me think right away of zines and as like a form of expression that is oftentimes like moved away in a sense from capitalism because it's often people who either want to share some information that isn't accessible through other means or share parts of like their own story, and they're doing it by like the knit and grit. It's getting out there somewhere. It's a collection of like community members coming together to either share their own pieces, help print these people out, help them distribute it, find the people who would want to actually like interact with information that are in these zines. And I feel like that's a very like I personally enjoy a great form of expression. And I think we see how that is like the perfect segue to later first begin with that initial intention of like just getting the story out there, and then through conversations, it being brought more into the mainstream, the spotlight being on this piece, depending on whatever it is, it in turn getting commodified, whether people tend to like agree with it or not, or whether it's advantageous to the person who originally created this narrative or not. And right away, I'm thinking of Mouse, the graphic novel about the Holocaust, and how Art, I'm gonna butcher his last name, Spiegelman?
Art Spiegelman.
Art Spiegelman. Okay. Art Spiegelman started off just talking about his own traumatic experiences and trying to relate to his father and different things that have happened throughout his life through like underground comics and zines, and then those getting more attention and finding a way to channel it into a like a larger narrative piece that was later published into Mouse and became one of like the largest and or like most like widely read like graphic novels, and he just became like a landmark person within the like comic scene. And to tie it directly to Boys Run the Riot, Keito Gaku released Light, which I'm not sure if anyone has like found a way, has like had the chance to read yet. I was trying to look it up right now on the side to see if I could find something to send in the chat, but it didn't come up right away. The way I accessed it was through the final volume of Boys Run the Riot. The end includes the full initial story that Keito Gaku later Keito Gaku later adapted into what we are talking about today, which is Boys Run the Riot, and you get to see the differences. You get to see a bit more of what like Lauren was referencing with like the author spotlight of what is more personal to Keito Gaku's story, and then you get to see like how Arya was saying that there's like it does like become like commodified. These two stories are different, so that was one thing that like a little bit like shocked me. I read it and I saw a little bit more angst expressed differently, maybe in a more, for me, I interpret it as like a bit of a mature sense, one that I can relate to as like someone in their 20s. And whereas like here you get to see how a frustrated high schooler teenager, which is something I can't fully relate to anymore, but still can get a lot out of, relates to like frustrations with like queer identities and specifically trans identities. But yeah, we're talking and reading about a product that was started off as a form of expression and launched Keito Gaku into the career that I feel like a lot of people actually get to benefit from, which is great. I mean, I feel very enlightened by everything I've gotten to read. Guys, I'm on these long-winded things today, but yeah, that's what I have to say.
Aria, I do really like your points about like the separation of like the commodifying and like not. I think I was thinking more so like I feel like once something gets to a certain scale, money starts to be assigned to it. And it's like, I guess, like how can we make sure in whatever way is possible that the money is going towards things that like matter in the originators? So like you mentioned something, Stephanie, about Art Spiegelman. So is his like the company that like publishes him, do you know anything about that, or did you just like bring it up just because it like compared, like is he still, I mean, I doubt he's alive, but if he is, like, is it him and his family that is like receiving like the money, or is it more like another source, like it's more the company that ended up mass producing and like setting out all of his copies?
So Art Spiegelman's still alive, but I do not know how the royalties work. That deal, I do not. I believe he is still with the same publisher, but again, I don't know the terms of the agreement and everything like that.
See, that was a really good question, and I think it is interesting because there is a lot of conversation. Well, since you did bring up like Art Spiegelman specifically, so in his graphic novel, he centers the story. Well, it like stars the story that is actually his father's story, and his father passed and is no longer alive, and you actually get to see Art Spiegelman like kind of interact with that understanding with when this is a story that technically, like, I don't know. It does get really interesting because I guess like by birthright it does belong to him, but in a very like real experience sense, it's his father's story, and he is not like sitting in money or like well, I don't know. I can't speak directly like to that, but yeah, I think I brought it up more so to compare how something that can be like underground can be brought into the mainstream, and for good or for worse, and like depending on whatever perspective you want to look for it, do become like commoditized, and brought it to like circulated for everyone to read. Modified.
I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I'm sure that there's some out there. And if anyone else has any, please feel free. But I think when things do become more commodified, they kind of need to become more palatable to like and more like sellable to wider audiences. So things that are underground can feel more like what's the word I'm looking for? Like there's a really specific word that would just be perfect right now and I can't think of it. But rebellious in a way and like much more like I can't think of the word, but there's one. But basically, yeah, I think palatable is a good substitute. But when things are need to be sold to a larger audience, they need to become more digestible to the general public, whatever. And we do see certain values get compromised, or I think you can sometimes, especially with like maybe certain characters being removed or like certain storylines not being featured. And I think it's interesting to like be able to talk to like the author or the artist or whoever created the story and see like their original intention versus the result, like the widely released final product. And I don't think that this happened with Boys Run the Riot, which is awesome. It's like great that we can see that. But I think in a lot of other cases that's really true, which is not awesome. And I think a lot of times it's like what I'm thinking of is like book to movie adaptions. That's kind of different because it's going from like audience to audience or like media form to media form. But yeah, it would not be fun as an author or a creator to have like your work be changed or to have certain elements of it that are really important to you to be cut or to be changed for like an audience's sake.
There was a TV show. It was called Kim's Convenience on, and you could see it through Netflix. And I really enjoyed the show. But then I found out later that in the writers' room, it follows a Korean family, and there were no Koreans or Asians in the writers' room at all. And I was shocked at that. I was like, "Run, really?" And so I think they're trying to diversify more writers' rooms as well as casts and everything like that. But yeah, it's just shocking how what seems obvious as far as perspective and point of view are not taken in all forms of production.
Yeah, it makes me wish that there was a comic creator in the room that could talk about audiences that are in mind when creating a comic. Who would that be?
I'm going to be egotistical and think you mean me. So wait, what is the question exactly? Sorry.
So, do you have like an appeal to audiences in mind? Like, is that something that like stays with you as you're creating, or like, do you, like I don't know, do you want people to leave with like a certain, as like Lauren was saying, like making it like palatable?
So, okay, for those that don't know, I am also a comic creator. I create a comic book called Mest, which is the nickname for the Metropolitan Sewer District. So it's a comic book in the sewers, and it features a main character named Lilliput, and she's kind of our tour guide to the weird, wild, wet world beneath our feet. And that said, I was inspired to create Lilliput because of my daughters, and I wanted to create a strong character that happens to identify as female, happens to identify as Asian, and so they could see someone who looks like them when they come into comic bookstores, that kind of thing. So that said, as far as valuable, I mean, it's self-published. So I created a comic book where I was thinking about my daughter. So I made up swear words, like instead of saying a S word or F word, I say dregs and different things like that, just for fun. Uh, and and it's in the sewers, so it's disgusting. It is absolutely gross. It's for those that hate the word moist. It's moist. It's wet. So I think about that. But I do think about story in that I want to keep it moving as needed. I want to keep character development as needed, but I don't feel a pressure to change it because it's my story. I work with an artist. His name is Dylan Speak, and sometimes he tweaks or changes, and sometimes he does he makes it better. Um, but yeah, I definitely get that feel where it's a collaboration. But as far as I think we're giving the audience, the fans that have bought the book, the fans that have given me feedback, I feel like we're giving them more of what we want, what they want, because it's in line with what we want. Does that make sense? Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up that whole section.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. Like from a creator's perspective, that you can find an audience that it's like a mutual relationship between you and the audience. Like when you're taking in their feedback and you're like, okay, well, they like this and they respond to this. So I also like this and I also respond to this. Let me write more of it. I think that's awesome. And it's like fantastic to see that in so many different like comics, and specifically with yours. That's awesome. And I'm hoping that it's like the same case for Keito with this too, like throughout the different volumes. I'm wondering like what his thoughts are on the audience reception.
And I think it's even more pure because he is also the artist and the writer. So, and I don't know exactly the process. Like I write a script, I give it to Dylan. Dylan interprets. But with a lot of these mangaka creators, they're both. So it's even more fascinating. I would assume Hideme is the editor. So I wonder what kind of relationship they have. Like, does Keito Gaku write a script or do thumbnails and then works with the editor first and then does finished art? As a process, how does that relationship work? That should be a question that should be asked in September when Keito Gaku is here.
Yeah, an answer is possible. We can get an answer. So that's awesome. But yeah, I think process is just something that's really interesting to think about. Like we can see it in how it in like different steps of the process like definitely influence the finished product, especially when you're reading manga, because it is a combination of art, like visual art, and like a written story or script. It's just so interesting to see like where like the beginning steps versus the finished, and like see how all of that impacts itself. And I think that's true for like all art, but with comics and manga, it's really interesting.
I'm thinking about our if let's do a blast to the past. Last year in September, we read Undocumented Americans by Carla Cornejo Villavencia, and one thing like that really stuck with me was how she talked about her relationship to the editors, because her story and the portrayal of like she talks about like her own journey being undocumented, working with education and like interacting with other undocumented people in the US, with a lot of angst and at times just straight up anger, at times anger that can be communicated directly to the reader, to like her assumed reader. And I've like seen a lot of interviews that she's done, and she talks about how thankful she is with her to her editors who let her actually like express that those like emotions, because I feel in the same way that like in Boys Run the Riot we get a lot of like interpretations of like negative emotions such as like rage, shame, like frustration, and they're often, because they have like so much like feeling tied to them, they're like removed from works that can like greatly be like uplifted once they're added in, which is what I got out of like that work specifically. So I like the like inclusion of those themes, and how through Rio and through Jean and other side characters we're able to see like the transformation that comes alongside with it, and move beyond those emotions and see like how opinions can change. And that's just like really rewarding. And with what Lauren was mentioning with manga, how like serialized it is, and how a lot of the times like these like manga creators are really like, cranking them out like back to back, and it's just something that's like very like beautiful to watch. And with Light being like a story that like brought Boys in the Riot, I'm sure that there was just so much reaction to that that was able to like build that like mutual relationship where Keito was like able to like not exactly like cherry pick, but like re-emphasize certain points and kind of like jump off those to offer more like context and like possibly like nuance behind them as well, which is like very awesome, and I feel like unique to this book. I'm also going to open like the floor for other like comments or questions, or maybe like just your general review as like we start to like wrap up on like the discussion part of our meeting today.
I would just say like one of my favorite interactions in the manga is with Rio and the teacher. It basically like what you guys are talking about. The teacher's like, whatever you want to say, just make sure it's like your own voice, even if it sounds a little awkward. And I could like that was like a pivotal moment for Rio, and I was like, teachers are awesome.
I kind of want to add, well, this is a bit of a review and a bit of a question, but like the thing I was like most skeptical about was the story's engagement with capitalism, especially with like they're like trying to be like entrepreneurs the entire time. And they kind of hit on it a little bit with like the like YouTuber and like commodifying their experience. But I feel like especially with the ending, it's like it kind of avoids a structural critique in like any real way. And like maybe, well, I like walked. This is me because I walked out of the Barbie movie like they could have talked about capitalism, but like I don't know. I kind of wanted like a bit more of a structural thing from it personally. But yeah.
Well, it's crazy that you say that, because in volumes 2, 3, and 4, we actually do get a breakdown of capitalism and like the relationship to being like an entrepreneur, which how we talked about earlier in the meeting with like the process behind it. There is, especially as like a young person, where you're not, and like the whole like gateway to entry in that, if it is like your ultimate goal and like the pushback that could come, it's something that definitely comes up. And I can't say anymore. You guys just have to check those books out, because they do, I feel like they do a really good job of like navigating like those conventions. So check it out.
I wanted to mention that like when I was reading the first volume in like with that like during that time I was also listening to Page Boy by Elliot Page at the same time, and it was just like so amazing. And a lot of like Stephanie, has you said that you like a lot of things came up in the book that you're reading, like when like and comparing it to Boys Run the Riot, like I felt myself having that same experience with Page Boy. I was like because Elliot Page does talk a lot about like the role of like fashion for him, like in first coming out as queer and then trans, and then also how like the yeah, just the role that you guys have to read it. Like, it's just really good, and I am a huge Elliot Page fan, so yeah.
Okay, so does anyone else have any final thoughts, questions, comments, or anything before I begin the wrap up?
I'm gonna say for those that mentioned evening wear and or boots that you haven't worn, I'm going to throw it down and say wear it to that Saturday night at CXC for Keito Gaku. There will be a reception at CCAD afterwards, and then we're gonna have karaoke at the Walrus. So like, I think evening wear is appropriate. Come as you want.
Um, awesome. I'm there. I'm sure so many of us will be there. Like, yeah, you can expect my finest. I'll pull the finest from my closet. Um, but yeah, that's so exciting. Also karaoke. Like, love that. But yeah, okay, so that's such a fun note to end this meeting on. And before we wrap up a little bit, I just wanted to give a little bit more information about Cartoon Crossroads, just because it is so awesome and I really think you all should go. I'll send the link again so you can look at the programming yourself, but there's so many awesome programs going on, and again, all free. If you're interested in like writing comics at all, or like getting involved in the process, or want to learn more about like any part of the like comic making process, there's an event for you. So I highly encourage you to check all of that out. Yeah, we're so excited about it. I'm like, I just can't wait. I keep talking about it to everyone. But yeah, so we hope to see you at Keito Gaku's event, which is again Saturday, September 30th at 8 p.m. And we'll be assembling a little care package for Gaku since it is his first time in the US. If there's anything you guys want to send along, like a letter, stickers, anything you feel would be appropriate, we would love to have it. So just let us know and we can collect it and send it over for you. So yeah, that's the last of my Cartoon Crossroads spiel, but I really hope that you guys will all go and tell your friends too. So I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie to announce and talk about our September book of the month.
Drum roll, please. Everyone's muted, but drum roll. So our September book of the month is going to be Rivermouth, a chronicle of language, faith, and migration by Alejandra Oliva. So I'm going to drop the link to Bookspace's listing of this book in the chat right now. And guys, I started this book already. It's in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. So what Alejandra Oliva does with this book is really, she talks about, I mean, what the title says. So migration and her relationship working as a translator at the like Texas border, and how that experience was for her working with migrants and working with like children, primarily like a lot of like Central American migrants, and how her own relationship to faith and like religion influenced a lot of her experiences. And it's been like described as a cross section between the undocumented Americans, which I mentioned earlier, like the angsty book, and Tell Me How It Ends, an essay in 40 questions, which is another great book that you guys should check out. And I would say that description is exactly right. This is a like thrilling piece where she really like interjects a lot of her personal narrative and like relationship to migration and Latinx identity to like language and the United States. And yeah, we're really excited to share more information as we post our book of the month announcement. But with the link that I set in the chat, not only can you purchase your copy there, but Bookspace Columbus is actually having a Labor Day weekend sale where there's going to be lots of discounts on books. So if you actually have yet to get your physical copy of Boys Run the Riot and you want it to be signed by the Keito Gaku at like the author signing portion, then now's your time. You can do a 2-for-1 order and get your little sale too while supporting an independent bookseller. So we're super excited to share more information on that. And to kind of like close off our meeting, we wanted to all of the admin wanted to share a few of like the guiding principles and just a little refresher of what really brings us together at the end of every month to have an engaging and wonderful conversation like this. So I think we're going to have Morgan start us off with the first principle.
Yes, these are our Hardcover Hotties Book Club guiding principles, and we have been doing this like the past few meetings. And just as a reminder, like this was inspired, shout out to Black Men Build Columbus. This was inspired by them during their No Name Book Club, and just thought it was really awesome. But yeah, I will talk about our first. Can everybody hear me okay also? Okay. Our first value is community and creative collaboration. And Hardcover Hotties is committed to cultivating relationships and partnerships within our community that centers this idea of like collective interdependence, which we believe is like fundamental to the livelihood and like liberation of our kin. And these relationships and partnerships that we work to cultivate are creatively constructed at their root and are dedicated to inspiring radical change that precipitates the imagining of such ideal community spaces and systems, worlds, and lives outside of those that are traditionally used to dominate and oppress. And next is Stephanie.
So we want to emphasize that Hardcover Hotties tries to be a radically alternative space. So for us, that means a space that really tries to make up for the ways that we've been hurt by institutions in the past, such as the like traditional classroom settings that like we brought up during this meeting. And instead, we want to make a space that welcomes everyone and welcomes unconventional approaches that focus on care and compassion and really challenge those hierarchies and centers curiosity in the meantime. So next we have Lauren.
Okay, so following that point about care and compassion, one of our grounding principles is friendship. We think that friendship is active and it comes along with dedication to creating and maintaining a safe and inclusive space where old and new friends both feel valued, heard, and respected. And our understanding of friendship assumes that all those who enter our spaces are held accountable to similar standards. And for us, friendship necessitates safety, comfortability, and empathy, and it is purely nurturing and compassionate. And I'll pass it off to Ellen to finish us off.
And our final principle is intention and integrity. We are committed to intentional actions and integrity, embodying honesty, transparency, and strong moral virtues in our interactions. And we also view accountability as a positive force for personal growth, kind of rejecting its association with shame, and which we talked about today, and upholding goodwill as a standard. Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, we just wanted to repeat these to emphasize like what brings us here and like what keeps us coming back. So we hope that you guys check out our next book of the month, and we hope to see your beautiful faces at the September meeting as well, and all dressed up for Cartoon Crossroads events. So with just making sure that no other like admin had anything else to add, we wonderfully send you off into the rest of your Labor Day weekend to maybe get some reading in, do some book space, online shopping. And again, thank you so much for coming today, guys, and we hope that you loved this book and everything, all the themes around it just as much as we did. So big heart send off, and have a wonderful day. Check out our story for updates and you'll see other things soon. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Woohoo, we did it. Yay.
Boom. Awesome. Booyah.
Another month under our belt.
Wait, is this still recording?
Oh.